Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodian of the land we meet today and pay my respect to their elder, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Then I pay my special respect to all the fallen heroes from Spring Revolution in Myanmar. I also thank this man AMI presenter, Hsu Pyae Eain, and Dr. Thet Htay. I appreciate all our participants from different parts of the world for joining the AMI seminar today. Our AMI president, Nicholas Copper, will open the meeting. Nicholas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, May, and welcome everybody from a very chilly Melbourne. Today's topic is Myanmar's conscription law, which more formally is known as the People's Military Service Law. It's actually a law which was introduced in 2010, only activated in February of this year. And it's a very concerning development. It affects a large proportion of Myanmar's population, all men aged between 18 and 35, and all women aged between 18 and 27, and professionals who are aged up to the age of 45 years are potentially liable for conscription. The military is aiming to hire or to recruit some 60,000 people every year through this law, a very significant number. And it touches also, and that's what we're going to focus on today, very much on Myanmar students who are in Australia. A number of them, some 139, are on Australia Awards scholarships, which traditionally have required students on the completion of their degree to return to their country to contribute back. And of course, this presents particular difficulties for the Myanmar students in Australia today following the coup. So anyway, without any further ado, we will hear more about this and what it means for those students and their families in Australia and back in Myanmar. So we have two speakers tonight. We have, first of all, Hsu Pyae Eain, who will talk first, and then she'll be followed by Dr. Thet Htay. But I'll introduce them separately. First of all, Hsu. She is a researcher focusing on public policy, freedom of expression, media freedom, interethnic relations, and activism. She works as a research consultant at Athan, a prominent freedom of expression activist organization. Following the military coup in 2021, she moved to Thailand, where she advocated for and documented the right to freedom of expression and human rights violations in Myanmar. In mid-2022, just a year after the coup, she relocated to Australia to pursue further studies and has recently completed her Master of Public Policy and Management here at the University of Melbourne. So without further ado, Hsu, I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for your kind introduction, and thank you for having me here today. I would like to share my screen because I prepare PowerPoint slides. So please let me share my screen. Give me a second. Can you see my screen? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yes.
I'm gonna make a PowerPoint presentation. All right, thank you again. So first of all, I would like to acknowledge the original people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of this land from which I speak. And I also would like to pay my respect to their elders, both past and present. And before I'm diving into the specific concern of the student in Australia, I think it's important to clarify that in Myanmar, this law is essentially forced military service, which is very different from other country construction law, like Singapore and South Korea and Italy. And in those countries, like construction laws have to professionally train citizens and bolster their military strength for national defense. However, in Myanmar, it's just an attempt like that the brutal military trying to legalize their soldier recruitment in the face of losing their human capital in fighting with ethnic and forces and revolutionary forces. Sorry. So it's just like being sent to the front lines and to be used as a human shield and porters as the military government had done in the past. So it's just legal cover for abuses, faults, recruitment practices, and grabbing any young men or women in villages and in city whenever they want. So I'm prepared that's like about the information of construction, but Nicola have already mentioned that the military expect to like 14 million of people to be served at the military service. And this include men aged 18 to 35, women 18 to 27, and expat extended to 45 for men and for 35 for women. But even they call expat, it's is very generalized and they don't have any like specific explanation. It's just say like any doctor or engineer or any person who are expert in their field. So it's just very generalized and it depends on how they call expert by the military. And Nicholas mentioned about the recruitment number that the military aim to recruit annually. And for Thet Htay, it's in 2 years for ordinary recruit and 3 years for expert, and it can be up to 5 years during a state of emergency. And anyone who is evading this conscription law is punishable by 3 to 5 years in prison and a fine. So this is the general information, and I'm supposed to speak about students in Australia and their concerns. So I Google how many students are in Australia, and Nicola also mentioned that we have like nearly 1,400 students in here in Australia, according to the Australia Government Department of Education. So you know that the COVID-19 and the coup have disrupted our education in Myanmar, impacting like millions of students' life in millions of student education opportunities. So this is like these 1,400 students are very lucky and privileged number of students who can study in Australia. And the student, like in source of funding, the student also is very varies. Like some people are self-funded, some are university scholarship holders, and some are partial scholarship holders, and some are government scholarship holders, like Australia Award, which have a very restricted, and they have legal obligation to return to Myanmar, like traditionally. But the release of this construction law has put more or less pressure and concern on all students, and maybe more severely to those who are aimed to return to Myanmar after they finish their study. And the information that I'm going to present in here is not just about my personal reflection on construction law. It's also about, because I got a chance to speak to some students in here in Victoria and also in New South Wales. So it still reflects some of the student concern and fear to return to Myanmar due to this law. So like we all students are within the eligible age for military service, and our first concern when we saw the news of the release of the law is like, what we're gonna do? Personally and honestly, my first reaction is I'm just relieved, for myself for not being inside the country. That make me away from the immediate construction threat. But like a millisecond later, my thought is like, what we gonna do if they send a notice or a letter, to be recruited to our family back home? Then I suddenly worry about like, my families and friends who are still within their, wanted age, and extensively to all young people inside the country. And although we are not like the student in Australia, although we are not inside the country, it is surely impacting our life and disrupting our plans, putting all of us in a state of uncertainty. And we have been like since that law release, we have been cautioning like what could happen if we return homes. Maybe we might face like arbitrary arrest, detention, and human rights abuses that military always do. And it's also give like moral dilemma, like because our opposition to the military regime and attempt coup, that makes like morally impossible for us to serve in the military. However, like some students in here, they already receive the summon letter or registration letter. I mean, their family back home, they already received the letter. But they can temporarily sorry with extension, like giving evidence that they are currently studying in foreign countries. So that emotional consent extend to our family member as well, who are now living under constant stress and fear for our safety. For those who haven't received the notice letter or registration letter yet, the anxiety of potentially receiving a letter or being, like cautioned by local authorities about our whereabouts, like that distress is really huge. And like certainly there's like our parents, they don't want to, they don't want us to return to the country. So they have to go to the local authority office, and they are asked like to explain why we are not in the country. And this causes unnecessary stress and burden to our family members. And they have to submit proof or evidence like to junta official saying that like visa information, passport, national identification cards, and even the address and phone numbers in the residing countries. So we also concerned that the potential prosecution of our parents and family member, because they are at the risk of prosecution and extortion by junta official if they refuse to ask or force their children, that is us, like to return to Myanmar. So as I mentioned before, their law have like if anyone who failure to comply will result in prosecution, and that the service law. So we have like daily concern and daily worry about our family back home, even though we are physically inside Australia. So, and also other like many of our friends and like family members, they also have been trying to flee the country, like such as like Thailand and Dubai, to avoid like being recruited. However, that migrating to another country is not an easy one, and it's very expensive because devaluation of Myanmar currency and also economic decline of Myanmar since the coup. This has been very expensive to travel and to stay in another country for an extended period if they don't have a job or they don't have like scholarship to study. So for those who cannot afford to go abroad and they have received their construction notice, the only option is like to flee to areas controlled by ethnic organization or local defense forces. So the fear and uncertainty surrounding the law has caused the constant distrust and concern among us, among our friends and family members. So definitely it's impacting our executive plans, and many of us have to rethink and make new plans. So we have been exploring options like to extend our stay abroad and considering alternative plans to ensure safety and continue career without the fear of being conscripted. So some of us like thinking like some of the options include like going to Thailand and working in Thailand, but it's also heavily depend on the host country policy. For example, like the recent announcement made by the Myanmar embassy in Bangkok. It was in May 2020, in May like last month, and they stated that the Myanmar passport holder, especially passport for visit and passport for education, they will no longer be able to renew their passport unless they provide specific document, including like a police check from Myanmar and a recommendation from the local administration officer. So this is intended to conduct background check on the individual their political involvement and to determine if they are trying to avoid from military recruitment. So if that kind of check are not passed, our passport cannot be renewed. So it's forced to return to Myanmar. So even the option of like working like extending our stay in Thailand is stay at risk and uncertainty. So I have been looking through other options and I have found like 2 possible options in here in Australia, which are like temporary graduate visa, which is for all international students that Australia government issue to work in Australia like for 2 or 3 years after they finish their studies, but they still have specific requirement like they have to study in Australia minimum 2 years. And another option is production visa, but it still had limit for some student like for those who receive government scholarships. So either way of all our plans, including like career plans and family plans, are not applicable anymore. And we have to start figuring out like about our life, like to start from scratch again. So as you can see, we have very few options and we either have to abandon our careers and start from the scratch or like hop around country with temporary visa. So this impact both physical and mental health of our student life. But I think the best option for us is that the Australian government approve an extended stay for the existing students. So I also have been looking for support from the university, and I found that we have like some support system from the university, like generally to all students, like about visa information and mental health services. But I found that they don't have like practical and like targeted guidance and support for Myanmar students. Maybe we should do something about this to the university to provide like specifically targeted and practical guidance to Myanmar students. So you can see that like even though we are in Australia, it is impacting the current like our mental health, and also it's impacting like the young people and students in Myanmar who are trying to grab education opportunity in another country. So I think from here, what we can do is like my caution about the conscription law. So I think Australian should provide visa extension to existing students and also should be bringing more students from Myanmar because this is the only chance that make less suffering of the young people in Myanmar. And because I believe that it will gain a deep like appreciation for Australia value, and which in turn like enhance Australian influence, like soft power and influence in Myanmar in the long term. And also I think is aligned with Australian commitment to humanitarian assistance, like by investing in education, Australia will be contributing to long-term development of Myanmar and helping to rebuild a nation like in the future, like maybe in 10 or 15 years when the country back to normal and the students who study in here are going back to the country and contributing their knowledge to the community. And I believe it will also enhance Australian global standing, like by bringing more students and by giving extension to current students. It will have Australia's reputation as a leading destination for international education, and is show like their commitment to global education equity and justice, demonstrating like their ethical leadership on the world stage. Yeah, so that is all from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Hsu.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. And our second speaker today is Dr. Thet Htay. And if I may introduce you, Dr. Thet Htay. Dr. Thet Htay is currently working as a consultant psychiatrist in Central Queensland. He's a fellow of the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists and also a member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the UK. He has decades of experience in clinical psychiatry. Dr. Htay has a lifelong interest in world politics, history, and nature, He's passionate about freedom and democratic governments globally. Since the military coup in Myanmar, he's been actively involved in the Spring Revolution movement, along with Myanmar's diaspora right across the world. Dr. Htay, it's a great pleasure to have you joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicholas, and thank you everyone for joining today. And it's my honor that I have to, I'm speaking today to get quite a good, number of audience. So I think, shall I start with a little bit of background, but more about the current, facts and figures, from process from the ground. And since this law, conscription law, was, activated in February, the process that made by the military junta is really very, very aggressively, recruiting soldiers, young men, across Burma. And they have opened, I think, many centers and recruited first batch, 5,000 people, second batch, another 5,000. And last week, they have started a few days ago, third batch as well. So it is churning. And they aim to recruit 60,000 a year, young men and women. And why are they doing that? Because the number of the current Myanmar army is dwindling. Over the last 3 years, I believe maybe more than between 20 to 30,000 probably Myanmar soldier has died in action, and they are losing war. They are losing more than 60 towns and losing 2,500 military camps, over the last 3 years. So the number is dwindling. This is their last resort to recruit young men and women and put them on the front. That is a reason. And they do it very, very aggressively. So how they run the business was, it is, they make a list, enlisted people, make a lottery, and then drag people into military camp and shut down any communication with the parents, switch on the mobile and things like that, and then run the very, very superficial, military training, and then they send to the front line to use as, basically minesweepers or human shields. I want to, at this point in time, I want to give one example of what they actually did as we speak. So this military law enacted 4 months ago. And in the first batch, it is, as we know, 5,000 people. And, among these 5,000 people, more than 900 are Rohingyas from Rakhine State. Can you imagine? More than 900. So those Rohingya peoples being dragged from military, they are, IDP camp in situ and many areas, and they've been lured with some citizenship card and money, but mainly they've been threatened and put in military camp. And immediately, I don't think they trained for 3 months, not at all. Military junta put in the front line and used as a human shields. And we have evidence, that photo evidence, video evidence, that they have to fight alongside military junta who committed crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity them just about 6-7 years ago. And many die in action as we speak, and many were captured by Revolutionary Army. So the bullets doesn't really choose, is it genuine army personnel or Rohingya? It just kills people. So this is how, the fierce and how dangerous this conscription law is. Now I want to move on to the impact, more wider impact for the whole country. As Pan Hsu speak, eligible young men and women are almost 14 millions. And this is roughly about 60% of the working force. But the military junta doesn't mind. They want to drag, a lot of people into their army and pay for the army just to, maintain their, I would say they are resistant to the, revolutionary groups. So what happened was back in February, once it comes out, it is actually out of blue. Everybody was shell-shocked. And the initial stress reaction and leading to chronic stress reaction. And a lot of people ended with sleepless nights, panic anxieties, and PTSD, and plus some become very depressed and many self-harm themselves. And some die by suicide. I want to give 2 examples. On one occasion, son and son-in-law were recruited immediately. Mother was so frustrated, she stabbed herself. On another occasion, the grandmother was really stressed out, unwell, depressed. When her grandson was recruited and dragged into the army, she jumped from the bridge. So it is a lot of atrocities are happening there. Now, at this point in time, I want to really clarify and differentiate about what we understand, but what Burmese people understand the conscription law in Burma. What's happening was, this is very different from what we understand in probably Western world. Number one, the law enacted, the government was illegitimate. It is a coup government and military government. They don't have a legitimacy to enact this law. And number two, when people are enlisted, drafted, they need to join the army, which is apparently, committing crimes against humanity. The Myanmar army, over the last 3 years, looted people and torched the villages and killed civilians and imprisoned many people, shoot people on the street. And so this is, really cruel, unprofessional army. They have to join. So as a result, these young men and women, and they got to do crimes against humanity. And they got to have a bloody hand like, the army. And number three, and it is also very, very dangerous time as I speak. And if you are drafted, and if you are in the army, the likelihood is almost 100% you will be sent to the front line, and without any practice, training, and these newly recruits will be used as human shields. So the likelihood there is a real, clear and present danger to the young men and women in Burma as we speak. So now I would like to mention about, just based on the news and based on my talk and my study, how people respond. So young men and women, they respond in 4 ways to me. Number one, it is about exodus. This is Myanmar exodus. From February, the Yangon, airport is full of hundreds of people, young men and women, leaving the country every single day. So tens of thousands, maybe 20,000, I don't know. A lot of people left the country, run away while they can, before all it's been, stopped. And number two, and there are also people who are not very affordable, don't have much money, no connection, and not have enough education or expertise to work. And they have to, cross the border and go to Thailand, either legally or illegally, to escape, this law. And third group, which is also very formidable, number of people, many thousand, join resistant group. It could be NUG PDF, or it could be in a Karenni region or Kachin region or in Rakhine. And many join as PDF. But what I'm talking about is Exodus and joining the resistant forces is minority. So we are talking about millions, many millions are, as we speak, staying at home or hiding, and they are very much, under stress. And I believe this is about society in stress, society in distress. We're talking about millions young men and women and their mom and dad and their family. Now, I want to focus, on Myanmar students study here in Australia. So the number, I look at the number, and back in 2021, when coup happened, it is 1,680. Now it's gone down to 1,300 something. So it is just over 1,000 students, Myanmar students studying here, looking for the bright future. And and number two, what will happen to them? If the visa, expire, they have to go back to Burma, and they will be enlisted, and many of them will be dragged into the army and sent to the front line. And like my example of Rohingya, many of them will be severely injured or die. So we are actually sending probably a few hundreds to death camp. And who is responsible? I don't know. We can all think about it. And I'm pretty sure military junta is most responsible, organization for this atrocity. Now, I think Hsu mentioned about, how Australian government can help, and I fully agree with Hsu. And what, government can do is just showing the, compassionate gesture to, firstly, to give an extension of student visa, maybe another 2 years, and then think again. Or some people or many young students who are involved in, activities against junta, they should be given, after the assessment, protection visa, because this is, I think, to me, should be okay. Now, lastly, I want to talk, I really want to end with historical example. Maybe we all might remember back in 1989, and there was a Tiananmen Square massacre. On 4th of June, the Chinese tanks entered the Tiananmen Square and killed the Chinese students. And a few days later, I watched that very, emotional statement from, Bob Hawke at the time. And he made a statement in early June that, Chinese students being ruthlessly killed by the government. So he actually, granted amnesty, but not immediately. But it was very, very, I think, historical, compassionate gesture by, Australian government. And following that, the process was, the Chinese student visa were, extended. And that led to, back in 1993, only 3 years later, the records say more than 40,000 Chinese students granted a stay visa, and many of them, I believe, live in Melbourne, Sydney, and everywhere, and contributed to Australian economy. So I think I just want to, I wish that the similar, gesture, should be applied to Myanmar students here in this, difficult situation. And I really believe that, they are facing life and death, and as we speak. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sia.
Thank you, Dr. Htay. That was particularly interesting and very relevant to our audience. We're now open up for questions. So if anyone has a question for either of our speakers or for both of them, please put it in the meeting chat room, and I will moderate those questions and put them to our speakers. We have one already who asks about advocacy process regarding this issue and the request for visa extension of Myanmar students being put to DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and also about the academic institution's position to the Australian government, and asks, has there been any updates to it, to the pressure that's been put on or the questions that have been put to the government, and do we have any information? And also, are there any collective plans or steps from the Myanmar students in Australia on resolving this particular issue? Before I turn to you, Hsu, in the first instance, I'd just like to say that for this webinar, I did reach out to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and ask them if they would like to speak and be party to it. They weren't available, but they did provide me with some information, which I'll share with you now. And this relates to the Australia Reward recipients. So that's just a small proportion, but an important proportion of the Myanmar students in Australia. But there is a particular duty of care for them because they're being funded by the Australian government. The Australian government is paying their tuition fees, paying their airfares, and also contributing to their living expenses. And as I mentioned at the beginning, because it's coming out of the aid program, generally speaking, there is a requirement for those students to return to Myanmar for at least 2 years. So there's a particular anxiety amongst that group because of this pressure to return rather than seek a visa extension, which is an option for others. Anyway, in relation to this group, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has advised that affected Australia Award recipients from Myanmar should have recently received outreach from their student contact officers at their respective universities. And those students who are due to complete their studies by September should also have now received specific advice regarding the next steps that are open to them. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is working closely with the Department of Home Affairs to ensure that affected scholars are supported at this very difficult time. And I add that any Myanmar Australia Award scholars who have residual concerns, any remaining concerns, should contact their student contact officers in the first instance. So I hope that's of some help to that particular cohort. But the question asked goes beyond that and asks about other students and also asks about the pressure that's being, or the representations that are being made to the government. Hsu, are you aware of any collective action that has been taken?
So in my under my knowledge, there are some students like collectively working together and approaching to DFAT, like to give an extension for visa to those students who have the legal binding to go back to Myanmar. So I have known about that, and there are some progress from DFAT. But I'm not sure like if they have been finalized or not. But for other students, I haven't heard any of the other students like trying to do like petition or any other thing. I haven't seen yet, but I think these particular student like that Australia was student are trying like collectively together and advocating defense for their safety. Yeah.
All right. And with the students who have managed to get an extension to their visas or found some other ways of staying out of Myanmar, do their families back in Myanmar continue to come under pressure, or is evidence of them being away sufficient to satisfy that the military's search for young people?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So even though the students are here and they can avoid the military conscription for a while, but their family and their family members are still worrying about, like, they are under pressure, of course, but at the moment, like as I mentioned before, they can have exhaustion like for 1 or 2 years when they are studying abroad, but they might ask like to force like to ask them to come back or to return to Myanmar, or they might have the problem when they renew their passport. So that make their family member concerned and give pressure about this. And also the family member like for temporarily they can sort it, but for the long time, I'm pretty sure, and also some information that I received from other students, they have to provide all the information about their student living, even like address and the phone number. And also if they are married, they even have to provide about their married, like their wife and their immediate family member as well. So like every day the family members are constantly under pressure and they don't know how to figure it out in the long term situation.
Right. I must say, I think you gave in your presentation a lot of reasons why Australia should be doing more and to support the students. But I think there's an additional one which you could have mentioned is that, in educating the Myanmar students today, Australia would be helping create that cohort of Myanmar people who, once the resistance is successful, who can go back with a skill set to help rebuild Myanmar. And I think that's important for the future. We have one question which is about the young people in Myanmar who are paying bribes to the army as a way to escape compulsory conscription, and whether we know anything about this, how extensive it is, and is it happening? Do either of our speakers have any information there?
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas. I think there are a lot of evidence, a lot of information, constantly coming to us that, the bribery is, at large. And it starts from probably, I would say, day one. And these recruiting, bodies like, ward, village, township admins, while they are serving their army's purposes, they are asking for bribes all the time. So it varies. The information we got, it varies from township to township. There are, at the moment, more than 170 townships across Burma. They are recruiting, aggressively, and those, the money for bribe varies from township to township. That's what we got at one point, and also it is not just to take off from the list. There is also another way that they recruit, which is, winding up people and dragging people from their home at night and stopping people when they come back from work and arrested and immediately sent to military camp and ask money. People who can afford pay off and release on the next day. People who are poor, cannot afford, sent to the army for training. So the money varies. It might be, on one occasion, it was 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs, which is about small amount, a few hundreds, the Australian dollars, but the price goes up. I heard that it can be 100 lakhs or even up to 500 lakhs, which is a lot of money. And they ask, from the rich young men and women. So the bribery is huge. And however, the difficulty for young people is the parents, they're scared, so they give money, release, but they never know they will come and get again. So it is definitely not a safe way, because this will be ongoing process. Yeah.
It must also create a lot of tension within Myanmar society if some people can afford to pay off the military and others can't, and they see the children of the wealthier ones being able to avoid this conscription law while their own children have to be dragged away.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is the case.
I'm curious also, it was mentioned that there have been many, thousands are leaving, young people are leaving Myanmar, some crossing the border illegally, crossing the river into Thailand, but also at Myanmar airport. It sounds like the military is not stopping young people from leaving even through major channels such as international airports. Is that the case?
I think they are tightening the screw month after month. I think first 2 months they are leaving and people can go as they wish. But now they have started to, tighten up the airport and say they are not. About a month ago, they issue a statement that people who's got a job visa, who are legally, who can go, cannot go out from the country, and no particular reason you can't go out. So people spend money, spend training, they got a proper passport, they got a visa, they are stopped from going out. So the military is tightening, and also there are barriers that if somebody is involved in any, according to their mind, suspicious, activities, they will stop. So at one point, I think it will be properly closed. The border will be closed, but not yet.
Right. We have a student from RMIT who's in the process of applying for a protection visa and is seeking some advice. And we also have in the chat room, for those who can see it, a reply from Paul Power from the Refugee Council of Australia, who provides details on for anyone in Australia who believes that they will be at risk if returned to Myanmar, how they can apply for an onshore protection visa, and that free legal advice on protection visa options is available at and various web addresses are provided there. So I'll bring that to the attention of any student who is considering whether they should or in the process of applying for a protection visa. Hsu, would you like to comment on any of those issues?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'm just reading the comment section. So you're particularly asking me about the applying for protection visa, right?
Well, there's one student asking whether they can join in any political activity.
Joining. Sorry, no. I'm sorry. Just give me a second. I'm just reading the comment, and that distracts me. So,
That's all right.
Maybe I can jump in a bit while
yes, please.
was,
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Basu was reading. So I think to me it's very clear answer. I think there is very clearly heaps of evidence is that the young people's life will be in danger if they go home. So I think they all have a right to apply for, protection visa. You got to save your life, and why not? Please do it. And then the evidence will be the substantial evidence for what's happening in Burma. And you have to also, if you have, some evidence that if you involve in any anti-junta activities, that can also probably add something. But I think I would really, that is the way, right, to me. But maybe Basu, and any thoughts on why people are reluctant to apply for, the protection visa? Why was that? Because they felt that they are so scared that they haven't, involved in any anti-junta activities, or why not everyone is applying?
Yes, when we said about the anti-military regime activities, I mean, it's not just about like taking the aim or protesting. There's so many ways that we can do supporting pro-democracy activities and anti-military movement. For example, like we can donate and we can help, and like there are so many events in Australia doing like fundraising and other like advocacy, that sort of event. And they can, I mean, I would say that like morally, I would say that they should be sincerely doing that kind of stuff, and they should be doing anti-military project and donating money and participating in fundraising event, that sort of thing. They can do this a lot of things, or they can even like do like click to donate, that sort of website thing. They can watch the YouTube video opened by anti-military and revolutionary forces, and they don't need to be publicly announced like, oh, I'm doing that sort of thing. You don't need to announce in their social media, and you can do it like secretly, but you have evidence that you are doing that kind of stuff. So that would be like giving them evidence, like showing that, oh yeah, I'm doing that sort of thing, so I need to be safe in here, that sort of thing. But I feel like you should sincerely be doing that kind of step from your heart and from the willingness to do for democracy and to do for the people of the country.
Thank you. Dr. Raymond Ways expresses his concern about the Myanmar students who have fled the country and been stranded on the Thai-Myanmar border, and indeed are in Thailand, and concerned that, you know, if they're forced to return to Myanmar by the Thai authorities, and asks if there is any advocacy to help these students from the student organizations in Australia, and can the Australian Embassy in Thailand offer some assistance to them on compassionate grounds. Well, on the second aspect of that, my understanding is if you're applying for those offshore, that is not in Australia, seeking protection, they're usually referred to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees for a refugee status determination. And then there's a separate issue of which country will then accept them. So Australia doesn't process offshore protection visa applications, is my understanding based on my time in government. But whether there's advocacy on those and whether there is a special case for those who were formerly students in Australia, I don't know.
Yeah, it's also beyond my knowledge about the helping and advocating for students on Thai-Myanmar border. And I think the Australian Embassy in Myanmar really doesn't have enough capacity to be helping out, because when you're applying for visa, it's just going through the online and you don't have to go to face. So yeah, I haven't heard anything about like having like anything about Australia Embassy in Myanmar having, maybe this is just beyond my knowledge. Maybe they might be doing something, but yeah.
Thank you. One of our online participants has heard that a lot of Myanmar students, new Myanmar students, have had their visas, applications to study in Australia, to get a student visa, rejected by Australia, and asks if that's true and has anyone heard anything about this. I haven't, but do either of our speakers?
Yeah.
Yes?
I think it is a student application and visa from inside Burma, you know, to come to Australia. Is it, Nicholas?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are heaps of example, and I got my friends, relatives, and also many other people that know. And now the Australian position, I believe, is, you know, to turn down student visa applied from Myanmar, and that's because, you know, I believe that the government probably doesn't want, frankly saying, that people to stuck in Australia, and look, so many, probably most of them being rejected to come to Australia to study over the last 3 years. The evidence is, as I mentioned before, you know, back in 3 years ago, it was 1,680. Now it is 1,390. So it is rather than expanding, it is dwindling because, no more people can come and study in Australia because visa will be rejected. So that's why a lot of people just go to Thailand and get a student visa from Thailand and stay there. So, but again, now it's becoming tightened, but still people can stay in, I think, Thailand as students and learning Thai language or business or anything just to stay legally in Thailand.
I also heard a lot of news about Myanmar incoming students getting rejected their visa approval from the Australian government, and that is very terrible because I feel like it's really important to have the young people in Myanmar, especially in their education. And the COVID and the coup had already distracted our education opportunities. So I think that I already mentioned that I think it's really important for the Australian government, not just extending visas for the current student in here, but they should also bring in more students because it's the only thing that they can do about the construction law in Myanmar, because we couldn't do anything about construction law inside the country, but we can do by bringing more students in here that make less suffering of young people inside the country. And I think, we should do something about advocating the government to bring in more students, not giving extension to existing students, bringing more students to Australia. That would be very helpful in the future.
Yes, I think we should look into doing that. Well, I think for both visa extensions and granting more.
Absolutely, yeah.
Myanmar people student visas. I'll take that on board. Susie Costello has asked this as well, so it's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Nick, can I also mention something about, I think Chris Lam mentioned in the chat box about the visa passport extension was done down by Canberra Embassy. I believe it is Burmese Embassy. So we need to be aware of military embassies, which is Junta's embassy, and they are issuing passport, and they are also, doing a military intelligence work, detective work, and they got raiders over activists, probably like us, and also over the Myanmar students studying here. They are gathering data and they are threatening Myanmar students. If Myanmar students is involved in any anti-junta activities, when they try to extend the passport, Myanmar embassy were done down, and they immediately, and they become, illegal to continue to stay here, and they will be forced to go back to Burma. And once they might be arrested in airport, which is also another thing. Many people who come back from Western country, if they are under the radar, if they know that they were involved in anti-junta activities, they were immediately arrested at the airport. So that's why I'm very clearly telling the students, come on, guys, if you have to apply protection visa extension, you got to do that. And I know that there's we don't have much time. Can I just say about 1 minute? I think what we really need to do is, I really want to back Myanmar student organization here, and also NUG, and also other organizations to really highlight this issue for these, 1,300 Myanmar students studying here, to have some good solution, like what happened to Chinese students 30 odd years ago. I think because so busy with everything, Myanmar diaspora involved in some activities. However, we need to focus on student issue, and they also have to be united and probably demand or request back whatever they do for that. It is life and death for them. That's what I want to mention, number one. Number two, just to plead for the Australian government and DFAT, this is the time they can do compassionate gesture of at least extension to all these, students, and these Burmese people will be very grateful down the line in history. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. As I mentioned, I'm happy as on behalf of Australian Myanmar Institute to write letters, but I would encourage others to do so as well. It's one of those things where the squeaky hinge gets the oil. So the more noise we make, the more likely it'll get attention.
Yeah.
We've reached our time, and it's been a very, very good, very productive, and very relevant discussion this evening. So I'd like to thank Hsu and Dr. Thet Htay for their presentations, and also thank all the audience who have contributed their perspectives and their questions, and look forward to you all joining us next month for our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone.